Welcome to English Horizon, everyone. Today we are talking about one of the most inspiring people in modern history, Nelson Mandela and his incredible fight for freedom.
Hi Alex, I am really happy to be here. Mandela is someone I have studied for years, and honestly, his story never gets old. There is always something new to learn from him.
Let's start at the beginning. Maya, can you give our listeners a quick picture of who Mandela was and where he came from?
Sure. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village in South Africa called Mbizo. He was part of the Xhosa people, and his birth name was Ralilila, which actually means troublemaker in Xhosa.
Troublemaker, that is quite a name to be born with. Did that name turn out to be fitting?
In a way, yes. He did cause a lot of trouble, but for injustice, not for people. He got the name Nelson from a teacher at school, which was common practice at the time in South Africa.
Interesting. So what was life like in South Africa when Mandela was growing up? I think it's important for our listeners to understand the world he was living in.
It was a very difficult world. South Africa had a system called apartheid. That word means separateness in Afrikaans. Under this system, black people and white people were kept completely separate by law. Black South Africans could not vote, could not use the same hospitals, could not live in the same areas.
So this was legal discrimination, written into the law itself.
Exactly. And it was enforced very harshly. If you broke these rules, you could be arrested, beaten, or worse. It was a system designed to keep black South Africans powerless.
And Mandela saw this from a young age. How did he respond to it? Did he become an activist right away?
Not immediately. He studied law at the University of the Witwatersrand, which was very rare for a black man at that time. But as he studied, he became more and more aware of how unfair the system was, and he got involved with the African National Congress, the ANC, in the 1940s.
The ANC, can you explain briefly what that organization was?
Yes, the African National Congress was a political movement that fought against racial discrimination in South Africa. Mandela joined their youth league and quickly became a leader. He helped organize strikes, peaceful protests, and campaigns of civil disobedience, meaning people broke unjust laws on purpose, peacefully, to show they were wrong.
So in the beginning, the approach was peaceful. What changed?
In 1960, something terrible happened. Police shot and killed 69 peaceful protesters in a place called Sharpeville. That event is now called the Sharpeville Massacre. After that, Mandela and others felt that peaceful protest alone was not working. The government was simply using violence to silence people.
That must have been a huge turning point for him personally.
It really was. Mandela helped form a military wing of the ANC. They focused on sabotage, destroying government buildings and infrastructure, but they had a strict rule: no killing of people. Mandela did not want the movement to become violent against human beings.
Okay, so he was walking a very difficult line there, fighting back but trying not to cause harm to people.
Exactly. But the government did not see it that way. In 1964, Mandela was put on trial. The charge was sabotage and conspiracy, which means planning to overthrow the government. He could have been sentenced to death.
That is a frightening moment. How did he handle it? Did he show fear?
He showed no fear at all. In fact, he gave one of the most famous speeches in history at that trial. He said he had fought against white domination, and he had fought against black domination. He said his ideal was a free and democratic society, and he said he was prepared to die for that ideal.
Prepared to die for it. That is an extraordinary thing to say in a courtroom while your life is on the line.
It was remarkable. And the world heard it. The judge did not sentence him to death, but he gave Mandela life in prison. Mandela was 46 years old at the time.
Life in prison at 46. So where did they send him, and what were conditions like?
He was sent to Robben Island, a prison on a small island near Cape Town. The conditions were very harsh. He was in a small cell, about 8 feet by 7 feet. That is roughly the size of a large bathroom. He slept on a mat on the floor and had to do hard physical labor, like breaking rocks in a quarry.
And he stayed there for many years. How long was he on Robben Island specifically?
He spent 18 years on Robben Island. Then he was moved to other prisons. In total, he was imprisoned for 27 years. Think about that, 27 years of your life, taken away.
27 years. That is more than a quarter of a century. For most people, I think that would break them completely.
And that is exactly what the government wanted, to break him, to make people forget about him. But it did not work. Mandela used that time to study, to think, to write, and to teach other prisoners. He actually became a kind of teacher inside the prison.
He turned prison into a school in a way.
Right. The prisoners called Robben Island the university because so many of them studied and learned there. Mandela helped organize that culture of learning. He believed that education was a powerful weapon, his words, not mine.
I love that. And outside the prison, what was happening in the world? Was anyone fighting for his release?
Yes, enormously. The campaign to free Mandela became a global movement. There were protests in cities all over the world. Musicians refused to perform in South Africa. Countries refused to do business with the South African government. The pressure kept building year after year.
So the world was watching, even while he was locked away.
Absolutely. His name and his image became a symbol of resistance. And the South African government knew it. They actually offered to release him several times, if he would just agree to stop the armed struggle. He refused every time.
He refused his own freedom. That is hard to imagine. Why would he do that?
Because he said freedom without conditions is meaningless, but freedom that comes with conditions is not real freedom. He would not accept release if it meant giving up the fight for all South Africans. He saw himself as a representative of his people, not just as an individual.
That level of commitment is almost hard to comprehend. Now Maya, here is something I am curious about. How did he stay mentally strong through all of that?
That's a good question. From his own writings and interviews, we know a few things. He exercised every morning, running in place, doing push-ups even in his tiny cell. He maintained strict routines. And he focused on the goal, not on his suffering. He always believed that one day, things would change.
So discipline and hope, working together.
Exactly. And also, and this is something people often overlook, he worked hard to understand his enemies. He learned Afrikaans, the language of the white rulers, so he could speak to them directly. He believed you cannot negotiate with someone you do not understand.
That is a powerful idea, especially for language learners listening to us right now. Understanding another person's language is a step toward understanding them as a person.
Beautifully said. And it worked. The prison guards on Robben Island, some of them actually developed a kind of respect for Mandela over the years. He treated them with dignity, even when they did not treat him the same way.
Okay, so let's move toward the end of his imprisonment. What finally led to his release?
By the late 1980s, South Africa was in crisis. The economy was struggling because of international pressure. There was violence in the streets. The new president, F.W. de Klerk, realized that the apartheid system could not continue. He began secret talks with Mandela while Mandela was still in prison.
Secret talks, so they were negotiating even before the release.
Yes. And then, on February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison a free man. He was 71 years old. Millions of people watched on television around the world. He raised his fist in the air, and the crowd went absolutely wild.
I can only imagine the emotion of that moment. But here is what I find fascinating: after 27 years in prison, he did not come out angry. He came out talking about peace.
But here is what almost no one talks about. Mandela actually had a moment of real anger when he first walked out. He said later that as he stepped through those gates, a surge of anger rose inside him. He felt hate for what had been done to him and to his people.
So he did feel that anger. He was human after all.
He was completely human. But then he made a conscious choice, a deliberate decision, to let that anger go. He said to himself, if I walk out of here with hate in my heart, then I am still their prisoner. That thought changed everything for him in that moment.
Wow. That is one of the most powerful ideas I have heard. He chose freedom in his mind before he was even fully free in his body.
Exactly. And that choice defined everything that came after. He did not call for revenge. He called for reconciliation, meaning bringing people together, healing the wounds, building something new together.
And then came the elections. Tell us about that historic moment.
In 1994, South Africa held its first fully democratic election, the first time every adult, black and white, could vote equally. The lines of voters stretched for miles. Some people waited 12 hours or more just to cast their vote. And Nelson Mandela won. He became the first black president of South Africa.
From prisoner to president. That journey is almost unbelievable.
It really is. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, sharing it with F.W. de Klerk, the man who had helped negotiate the end of apartheid. That image of the two of them together said so much about what was possible.
What did he do as president? Did he seek revenge against those who had imprisoned him?
He created something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Instead of putting people on trial for crimes committed under apartheid, this process allowed people to come forward, tell the truth about what they had done, and in many cases receive forgiveness. It was painful, but it helped South Africa move forward without a civil war.
That must have been incredibly difficult for victims to accept, seeing people who hurt them go free.
It was deeply painful for many people. And not everyone agreed with it. But Mandela believed that the country's future mattered more than personal revenge. He served one term as president, just 5 years, and then he stepped down voluntarily, which was itself a powerful democratic statement.
He stepped down by choice. That is something many leaders in the world fail to do.
Right. He always said that leadership is not about power, it is about service. He served, and then he made room for others. He continued working on causes like the fight against HIV and AIDS in Africa until his final years.
And when did he pass away?
Nelson Mandela died on December 5, 2013. He was 95 years old. World leaders from over 90 countries came to his memorial service. People around the world lit candles, left flowers, and celebrated a life that had truly mattered.
So Maya, as we bring this conversation toward a close, what do you think is the single most important lesson Mandela's life teaches us?
I think it is this: your circumstances do not have to define your character. Mandela was put in the worst possible situation: unjust imprisonment, hard labor, isolation. But he chose, every single day, who he wanted to be. He chose dignity, patience, and hope. That choice was always his.
The choice of who you want to be, even when everything around you is trying to take that away.
And I think that connects to something he actually said. He said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." That sentence has helped me personally in difficult moments. It is so simple, but so true.
It always seems impossible until it is done. I think every one of our listeners can hold on to that sentence today, whether they are learning English, chasing a dream, or facing something really hard.
Absolutely. And learning English, by the way, is its own kind of small courage. Every time you listen, every time you try to speak, you are doing something that was once impossible for you. That is the Mandela spirit, in a small and everyday way.
I love that connection, Maya. Thank you so much for sharing all of this today. You have brought Mandela's story to life in a way that I think will stay with our listeners for a long time.
Thank you, Alex. His story deserves to be told again and again. Every generation needs to hear it. I hope our listeners feel inspired, and maybe a little braver, after today.
And to everyone listening right now, think about one thing in your own life that feels impossible. What would it mean to keep going anyway, just like Mandela did?